Hello again. I'm very glad for your invitation to your Dunara Davos University of Galat's Scientific Conference of Doctoral School 2022. It's really a big honor for me to share our knowledge. I would like to thank to the organization committee. It's a big honor for me. This year, I'm going to present to you a multidisciplinary approach to the evaluation of the adult sexual assault cases based on laboratory and physical examination. The World Health Organization defines sexual violence as any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual commands or advances or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against persons' sexuality using coercion by any person regardless of their relationship to the victim. I would like to give some statistic from the literature. According to the data of World Health Organization, 35% of women worldwide experience physical and sexual violence. 30% of them are perpetrated by their partners, and 7% of them perpetrated by their non-partners. In 1/3 of countries, at least 5% of young women reported experiences of sexual violence in their childhood. Evaluation of sexual assault cases should be performed with detailed physical examination and, of course, with detailed anogenital examination and laboratory analysis, and by using forensic colposcopy within the shortest possible duration of time and at once at a fully equipped healthcare facility with a multidisciplinary approach. In our traditional examination, anogenital examination by naked eye is not so satisfying as evidence as much as in the past by the jurisdictions. So our evidence should be more scientific and valid. For example, camera photographs are not valid as forensic colposcopy photographs in the court. In our study, socio-demographic and medico-legal data of 295 sexual assault cases who applied to Mersin University Medical Faculty, Forensic Medicine Department, Sexual Assault Evaluation Unit between 2010 and 2012 were analyzed. 88% of them were women, the victims, and approximately 11% of them were male. The ratio between female and male victims was found to be about 8 times more than women. These findings, the ratio between women and men, is concordant to other statistics of international forensic community. The average age of the victims were found to be approximately 27. 52.2% of the victims were between the ages of 18 and 24. We have one female case around 82 years old. It was surprisingly. Socio-demographic characteristics of the victim. 12 of the cases are foreign nationals. 8 of them were Syrian. The most common level of education were primary education with 56.4%. The lower levels of education were observed among males. The marital status is mostly single. 66.6 of them were single. The percentage of being single were higher for male. Most of them, 74.3% of them do not have any job, and most of them, 83.5%, have an average monthly income lower than the minimum wage. 92.8 were live in the centers of the provinces and the districts. When we analyze the comorbidities, we saw some predisposing factors and comorbidities, especially mental retardation, to have a psychopathology, to have a physical disability, and the history of sexual violence. It was determined that 81 of the victims had either mental retardation, some psychopathology, or physical disabilities. Mental retardation is more common in male cases of victim. There was a history of sexual violence in 15% of the cases. I have technical difficulty again. The time period of sexual assault, it was found that 102 of 192 cases occurred at night. 90 of them occurred in daylight. There is no distinct differences between daytime and nighttime, as you see in the graphic. When we analyzed where the sexual assault took place, we saw that sexual assault was found to be about 4 times more common in indoor places than outdoor places. Mostly, we saw as a place of the sexual assault, we saw that most of the sexual assault cases happened in home environment, then public places, then working places. It was noted that assaults most often happened in a house where the victim also lived. The time between the incident, I mean the sexual assault, and the judicial notice. It was found that 112 cases, the judicial notification occurred within the first 72 hours, and for 63 cases, the judicial notifications occurred more than 1 year. I mean, mostly the victims apply to a police and report the assault within first 72 hours. And if they pass these 72 hours, surprisingly, we saw 63 cases they apply to the court or police, they make their accusements later than 1 year. It's really surprisingly. When the age groups of aggressors were examined, it was found that the aggressors were most often between 20 and 30 years old. It is about 43% of the cases. The average age for the aggressors, perpetrators, were found to be 34 years old. The youngest perpetrator were 17 years old. The oldest perpetrator were 74 years old in our study. When we analyze the relationship between attacker and the victim, the cases in which they know sexually assaulted the victims were about 5 times more of the cases in which they were assaulted by someone they didn't know. Acquaintances were found to be 83.1% and strangers were 16.9%. Intimate partners, we accept the husband, boyfriend or lover, or ex-husband or ex-boyfriend or ex-lover accepted as intimate partners in our study. Sorry, I can't pass this slide. I'm trying. Female victims were found to be most frequently subjected to sexual assault by their intimate partners. This is a valuable outcome of our study. It was found that 46.6% of the female victims were sexually assaulted by their intimate partners. Male victims were found to be mostly frequently exposed to sexual assault by strangers. In 18 cases, it was found that the victims met the attacker through the internet or social media. And these meeting on the social media and internet arising years by year. While the social media becomes much more popular, I think that the ratio by using social media will increase. Distribution of the threat types used by the attacker. It was found that, I'm sorry, I think I passed one slide. I'm so sorry. Let me, okay. Okay. Distribution of the cases according to the number of the attackers. It was found that in 44 cases, the victim was subjected to sexual assault with more than one assailant. 83.4% of them were attacked by just one parent. Of course, there are some treats for sexual assaults. In our study, it was found that the victims were mostly forced into sexual assault with verbal treats. 85% of the cases treated by verbally. 50 cases, they use arm for treat. And in 25 cases, the victims threatened with video footage or photos. And I saw that if they met on social media and the attacker, if the victim met the attacker in social media, the threatening with video, footage, or photos is quite higher in that cases. The victim's stage of being under the influence of alcohol and substance. In 54 cases, it makes 16.6%. The victim was found to be under the influence of alcohol or substance during the sexual assault. In 30 cases, it makes 9.2%. The victim was forced to take alcohol and/or substance against their free will by force or deception. In 24 cases, which makes 7.4%, it was found that victim was subjected to sexual assault under the influence of alcohol and/or substance, which they took voluntarily. The total percentage of the breaking the resistance of victim by giving alcohol and drugs without consent or to use benefiting from the effects of alcohol that victim took with consent is totally 16.6%. In 103 cases, which makes 36.3%, the victim was found to be abducted against their will, confined during the sexual assault, or held in such a way that they could not escape. It's a really big percentage of abduction. 34.9 is a really meaningful, surprisingly higher levels of abduction in our study. It was found that sexual assaults by persons unknown to the victim, it was found that in cases of sexual assault perpetrated by persons unknown to the victims were mostly male, had a lower level of education, and more often mentally disabled. Armed threat, kidnapping, assault in an open environment, and more than one assailant were more likely in these cases, in male cases and in disabled cases. Also, in these cases, the reporting rate was found to be higher in the first 24 hours. I mean, if a victim assaulted by the persons they do not know, they are in a high percentage, they are going to police and report within the first 24 hours. And armed threats, kidnapping, assault in the open air environment, and more than one assailant were more likely in the cases of sexual assaults by persons unknown to the victims. Repetition of sexual assault. It was found that 125 cases, which makes 42.4%, sexual assault was found to be repeated. And in our study, this is also some valuable data that huge repeated sexual assault ratio, which we was not expected. It was found that repeated sexual assaults were more often perpetrated by an intimate partner with verbal threats and promises of marriage. The rate of forensic notification after 1 year was higher in these cases, in repeated cases. Sexual assaults most often happened with vaginal penetration, with 133 cases. Anal penetration is 80 cases. Multiple types of penetration together, combinations of them I mean, with 48 cases. And a non-penetrant sexual assault, 7 cases, unidentified 23 cases, and unknown 5 cases. Detection of non-genital physical examination findings. Non-genital physical examination findings were present in 113 cases, which makes 38.3%. Traumatic lesions compatible with physical violence and or force were detected in 103 cases, which makes 34.9%. Non-genital sexual lesions were detected in 24 cases. When we analyze the vaginal examination findings, an acute or new lesion in the healing phase was detected in 28 cases of 243 cases, in which a vaginal examination was performed. An acute and or new lesion in the healing phase was noted in 26 cases of 170 cases in which vaginal penetration was described. An acute or new lesion in healing phase was detected in 23 cases of 70 patients who did not have an active sexual life and both had vaginal penetration by assault. The latest application period for which acute and healing vaginal examination findings are detected in 14 days. I'm trying to give you the information of the 14-day for vaginal examination is cutoff and critical point. So we should evaluate the cases as fast as possible after the assault. After 14 days, we have 0 chance to find an acute lesion. When we analyze the location of hymenal lesions given as time numbers on a dial, in 3-9 line and in the lower half, it was found that the location of an acute and healing tears in the hymen was most frequent in the 6 o'clock position, in the gynecological position, and in the lower half of the 3-9 line. It was found that 82.5% of the lesions were in the lower half of the hymen. When we analyzed the anal examination findings, it was found that 30 of 294 patients who underwent anal examination had an acute and or healing lesion, and 12 had a chronic and old lesion. It was found that 25 of 126 cases describing anal penetration had an acute and or healing lesion, and 11 of them had a chronic and old lesion. Of 144 cases whose vaginal swabs were taken, 30 of them were positive for spermatozoa. It makes 20.8%, and it's a big success for us to find more than 20% of positive spermatozoa. It is a success of a fast sampling and fast examination with a good technique. And 14 of them had suspected spermatozoa or cell morphology requiring serological confirmation. 100 of them were negative for spermatozoa. The longest period detected in spermatozoa was 7 days. 7 days is really critical cutoff point and critical period for sperm detection. In 157 cases whose anal swabs were collected, 9 were positive for spermatozoa, and 14 of them has suspected spermatozoa and cell morphology requiring serological confirmation. 134 cases had tested negative for spermatozoa. The longest period detected in spermatozoa was 3 days. Pregnancy was detected in 11 of 160 cases evaluated for pregnancy. Detection of sexually transmitted diseases in sexual assault cases in our study. Sexually transmitted diseases were detected in 6 cases of 179 cases evaluated. Psychopathology in sexual assault cases. In our study, it was detected in 140. About 79.1% of the cases were evaluated in terms of psychopathology. It is really a huge percentage, and we know that sexual assault has serious psychopathologic consequences. We find approximately 80% of the patients has positive psychopathology after they are sexually assaulted. The diagnosis of the cases according to the DSM-4 and 5, post-traumatic stress disorder with 32 cases, acute stress disorder with 35 cases, adjustment disorder 26 cases, depressive disorder in 24 cases, post-traumatic stress disorder plus depressive disorder in 8 cases, anxiety disorder in 8 cases, anxiety disorder plus depressive disorder in 5 cases, dissociative disorder in 1 cases, dysthymia in 1 cases, and 37 cases were normal psychologically. The most common diagnosis was post-traumatic disorder with 22.5% of the diagnosis. It is really surprising and shocked for us, because suicide attempt after sexual assault were found to be 10%, more than 10%, 10.2%. That shows us the serious consequences of sexual assault psychologically. In 30 of 246 cases, the victims state that they attempt suicide after the sexual assault. As a conclusion, women, people with disabilities, people with low levels of education, people with poor economic status, people who have been subjected to sexual violence before were in higher risk for sexual assault. Sexual assaults took place mostly often in victims' own home, indoors, mostly often by their intimate partners, by someone they know at any time of day, often through physical violence and some threats. About half of the victims have been subjected to repeated sexual assault. Approximately 1 in 3 cases applied in the first 72 hours, which is the really critical period for evaluation and for sperm detection for other laboratory analyses. Acute lesion in about 1 in 9 cases on vaginal examination, about 1 in 10 cases have an acute lesion on anal examination. Sperm was detected in about 1 in 5 cases from whom vaginal swab samples were obtained. The longest detectable period was 7 days for vaginal sperm analysis. Sperm was detected in 1 of 18 cases from which anal swab samples were collected. The longest detectable period was 3 days for anal swabs. Psychopathology was detected 4 of 5 patients who underwent psychiatric evaluation. It was found that about 1 in 8 victims attempted suicide after sexual assault. As a result, colposcopy-guided early physical examination and detailed laboratory examinations are critical to obtaining medical evidence for sexual assault cases. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to share my knowledge with my colleagues. Thank you and see you next year.